Hey everyone, with this video we're starting a new mini-series on the channel on chaos destruction inside of the early access release of Unreal Engine 5. The bite-sized UE5 chaos physics video was the most popular and is still the most popular bite-sized UE5 video on my channel, and a lot of you guys have been asking for more content on chaos physics, and so that's what I'm going to provide. With this video, I'm going to go over geometry collections, how to create them, but also why they're there, what purpose they serve, and what the best workflow is, and how to best create assets to be used with chaos destruction and geometry collections. There isn't much more to say here, so let's jump right into things and get started. To begin this video on geometry collections, I wanted to start outside of the engine with this image that I pulled from the internet, because I want to not only show you how to create geometry collections in the engine, but to explain the thought behind them and some of the best practices to try to keep to when you're creating 3D models for them. I have this wall here, and let's say we want to bring this wall into the engine as a 3D model. Well, there's a lot of different ways to do that, and the manner in which you choose to 3D model this really depends on your project. Do you want a single building, or what if you want some different buildings made out of bricks, using some of the things like these pillars and these windows? Do you want to add variation? And that will determine what workflow you use, whether you're just 3D modeling this entire building as one piece, or if you are breaking it apart and 3D modeling the different assets individually, like these windows, the windowsills, this section here, the columns, because if you model them as separate assets, you can combine them in different ways to achieve different results. For this video, I'm going to assume that we want to create more than one building with some of these assets, and so we want to take a modular approach. Well, in a normal modular approach, you might 3D model this entire wall section with the window as a single 3D model. You'd have another one next to it, two more down here. These security cameras could be their own 3D models. You could model this pillar as its own model, and there's nothing wrong with that. You could even model these two windows together with the wall behind them as a single 3D model. You could create a blank wall to mix in, and that works perfectly for a regular non-chaos destruction workflow. But the thing about, well, physics and real life is that, as we all know, the glass pane on this window is not going to break the same way as the bricks of this wall. And if we want to create a destructible building using chaos destruction, we have to take a slightly different approach. For the different parts of the mesh to break apart in different ways, we need to create them separately as separate meshes. The glass panes for this window would be its own mesh. The mullions and munlins, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, these bars, these horizontal and vertical bars on the windows, would be their own mesh for each window. The bricks of the walls would be their own mesh. You might even make these windowsills their own mesh so that you could switch these two different types out. What's important is that the materials are their own meshes, and now your glass can shatter like glass and your brick can break apart like brick. But there's a problem. Do you really want to drag out your glass panes and place them in your window, and then place your window in your brick wall, and then maybe place this different material of your windowsill on your windowsill that you then have to you then either have on the wall or need to place on the wall? It becomes a whole lot more work. And so you might be thinking, well, then there must be a trade-off here between having your different materials that break apart differently and having to take more time to build out your levels or your buildings. or just having an entire section of wall that breaks apart like a brick wall. And that would be a trade-off if geometry collections didn't exist. But with geometry collections, what you do is you just do the work once. You line up your glass panes, you line up the rest of this window, your windowsill, your wall, and then you combine it all into a geometry collection. A geometry collection is just taking your different meshes and presenting it to you as something of a single mesh that you can drag and place around, while presenting the data to Chaos in a way that it sees it as multiple meshes. It can still understand that the glass panes are different than the bricks. And so that enables you to apply different fracturing methods to the different static meshes that are used to create your geometry collection. And so breaking apart this brick wall into your different meshes might look something a little bit like this. We have this pipe here that runs through. I didn't go and do the cameras, but you have your glass panes. Maybe I'll just up the opacity here. So you have your glass panes that are separate. You have your brick wall. You have your pillars. Technically, with Chaos, your pillars and brick wall and, the windowsills, except for that little sliver up top, they could all be the same mesh, but then you wouldn't have the modularity, so I went ahead and split them apart. And so you have all these different meshes, and each part of the mesh that's a different material is separated out into its own thing. Now, let's go into the engine and create a geometry collection. I didn't have the time to create a bunch of different 3D models to use as an example for creating a geometry collection. So instead, I'm going to use some cubes in the engine because they work well enough for the purposes of this demonstration. So now we have this 4x3 wall section. And we could duplicate it and place it next to each other. That gives us a wide column, so maybe we'd want to half the size of the pillars. Or we could just make the pillars and the wall between a separate mesh. Oops. Cut that instead of, my goodness, I keep pressing the wrong things. There we go. Like that. And this piece becomes a bit long, and so maybe I want another variation of this piece. There are different ways to break this up, to break this apart, but we have separate meshes here. We'll pretend we have more detailed meshes here. They're modular. We have our ledge, we have our brick wall. Maybe our ledge is made out of a different material. Maybe our pillars are made out of a different material. The same material as our ledge. And so we want them to fracture differently. And so we can select all of these, and we can make a geometry collection out of them by clicking on the Fracture Editor button and clicking New under Generate over here. I'm going to put it inside of a Geometry Collections folder I've created, and I'll name it brick wall 1. And I'll actually do GC underscore for geometry collection brick wall 1. I'll create it, and now we can see that if we are in our fracture editing mode, we can click on the different meshes, but the asset itself here is this one thing. If we click out of the mode, we can move it around as one thing, we can duplicate it as one thing, and this would be the best approach, to have this as an asset, then to have another wall asset that can go in between them. That's its own thing. And so now we can go in and fracture these pieces. Like, we could fracture our ledge uniformly. We could do a cluster fracture for the ends of the pillars. Do a uniform for the pillars. Maybe we want to do a clustered fracture for the brick wall. Then maybe we want to fracture it 2 more times to get some more detail in there. And I'll cover fracturing much more in depth in the next video. But for now, I want to keep the focus on geometry collections. And so we have this asset that can be fractured, that's made out of these different static meshes, and these meshes can be set to fracture in different ways. If I just search bone and uncheck show bone colors, now it looks normal. And if I open up the geometry collection, and that wasn't the right one, there we go. I've been doing some playing around with it in this project, so I have the other 2. And I closed out of something here. And I'm not sure how to get it back. I'll reload layout. Open it back up. Here we go. We want to change the collision type to particle implicit and the implicit type to level set. Otherwise, it'll just explode the moment we play the game. So if I save that and I click play, here's the wall we made. And if I jump into it hard enough, maybe if I've modified this gun a bit. Nope, nothing. Well, we'll play around with the damage thresholds in another video and play around with the fracturing and all of the settings with it in another video. But this video, really, I just wanted to focus on the geometry collections and some of the best practices when creating them and why they're there inside of the engine. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you found it useful, if you've learned something from it, give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do, be sure to hit that notification bell. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.